we have invited our resource person, Dr. Narendra Kumar, from IPEC, New Delhi. Uh, he will speak on social advocacy as an instrument of social change for community engagement. As we know that Dr. Narendra Kumar is associated with the campaign for tobacco-free kits as principal consultant for national and state policies on tobacco control. He is specifically responsible for tobacco taxation and related policies. He is trained in social policy and planning. He is a regular contributor to United Nations Human Rights Council debate in Geneva. He also founded and steered several well-known NGOs. So, with these words, on behalf of the UGC, HRDC, MMTC, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh, Department of Social Work, the coordinator, Dr. Muhammad Tahir, and other faculty members and the participants. We welcome you, sir, for really interacting because you have a very vast experience working with the community. So really, it's a good opportunity for the participants as well as the our institution to enlighten with your sharing. So we are very much thankful to you, sir, for accepting our invitation and enriching our participants with your experiences. So we welcome you to this morning session. Thank you very much. Now we will request you to please share your vast experiences with our participants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Naseem. It's a great pleasure to be, back with your group of, trainees. I think last time I interacted with probably the different group in sometime in January this year. So yeah, I mean, and my apologies that I could not, sort of join you last week, and it has to be the last day, I guess, of this training program.
Yes, yes.
Uh, what we intend to do today is that, as the topic suggests, that I mean, how social advocacy could be used for social change, while in the process, we are in the process of community engagement. Uh, it's an interesting sort of topic, and it also borders on several, sort of new concepts. But since this is a more of a practical session, we would like to make it I'll give you some sort of initial thoughts. Then possibly it would be really good to get more questions and make it more sort of participatory. I have a few slides to share, which I'll do now, and then, as I said, I'll stop in about 25 minutes or half an hour, and then we can interact, through question answers. Okay, can everyone see my screen, Dr. Naseem?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
thank you, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, as that sort of topic suggests, that this is the discussion that we have today is social advocacy as an instrument of social change. So basically, we are talking about three things. One, what is our vision or concept of social change, which I'm sure through these sort of interactions that you have had during this training program, and otherwise also you would certainly know what social change is, but we will again go through it to sort of refresh our memories. Second concept is social advocacy. I mean, how social advocacy as an instrument of, let's say, human intervention, as an instrument of social intervention, as an instrument of, in some ways, socio-political intervention, can lead to change. And is that change, at, I mean, does it get confined at the community level, or the all the what happens at the community level is in a way directly, indirectly related to broader level policies? Because essentially, what is social advocacy? I mean, let's start with that, but I'll come back to the core of question itself. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to. Just a second, please. And there is some. It's got. Okay. So I'm sure everyone would know what is social change, but let's, as I said, go through it. So social change could mean several things to several persons depending on their standpoint, and it could also be dependent on several factors. But broadly speaking, social change is transformation. So it's a progression from one stage to the next stage, from A to B. Transformation of it could mean cultures, it could mean social institutions, it could mean functions, and all societies, whether developed or underdeveloped, tribal, agrarian, economic, industrial, all societies go through some kind of changes at any given point of time. So in that sense, social change is in a way, it's also an autonomous process. I mean, whether you work for it or you don't work for it, social change will happen because several other things are taking place anyways. But are we talking about that social change, or are we making a conscious effort to induce social change? Is something that we have to be conscious of. Essentially, what we are doing in this session, or when we say social advocacy as an instrument of social change, is that we are not leaving it to the process or to the destiny. That so what we are doing is that, based on the analysis that we have done and based on the factors that drive us, we are making a conscious effort to make social change. So social change will happen, but we are either accelerating that process, or we are giving a guidance to that process, or in some ways we are also resisting the changes. Most change is not instantaneous, as I said. In society, change is, because otherwise, if we leave it to the society, it can be very slow. And since society is composed of various actors, different kind of it is and these actors could include public at large, governance, economists, doctors, etc., professionals. So if you leave everything to the society, or to the market, to the politics, then I think social change or social develop the changes that are taking place can take directions which are not necessarily desirable from our point of view. So that is why we have to give some sort of direction to social change, and for us that instrument, that intervention for that social change is essentially what we are calling social advocacy. Now, what causes social change? I mean, as we said, it happens because there is a time sort of process. It's a time sensitive process. It's a time bound process. It's a process which is led by time itself. So, if you remember, the serial, famous serial in Mahabharat, in the late 80s, there was a background sort of introduction commentary by Samay, that मैं समय हूँ और मैं चलता रहता हूँ, मैंने ये भी देखा है, मैंने वो भी देखा है. This means that the time itself is a kind of career of social change. But I'm reiterating that we are not talking about that social change which is spontaneous or which is autonomous. What we are talking here about the conscious social change that we would be making. Now, broadly speaking, I mean, there are theories, I mean, what causes social change. So one theory says that society is they call it evolutionary theory. I mean, as in case of biology, or case of human race, Darwin has said that societies evolve from one stage to the next stage. So if during that process of evolution, you get from simpler to more complex, like organisms, etc., organisms, etc. And since those complex, from a journey from simpler to the complex, from agrarian to the industrial societies, from let's say the mechanical to the digital based societies, those changes are evolving, and if societies do not adapt that change, to the social structures do not adapt to that change, so the cultural practices do not adapt to that change, societies will fall behind, and we have many examples. Also, the evolution or the changes are not necessarily linear, which means what I'm trying to say is that it's not that every society will follow one kind of trajectory for social change. Different societies choose different ways of achieving social change. There is a Western society, the concept of Western sort of industrialization and modernization, that societies from agrarian they become industrial, and then they become service oriented, and this is how the Western social change has taken place. Now, does every society need to go through that process? Not necessarily, for several reasons. Because it is also dependent on not in one kind of activity, not, for example, not on economic activity alone, or not political activity alone. It's also, for example, religious. How do the societies which are driven by religious ethos, they tend to take social change. For some societies, I mean, as the example of Bhutan, they say that for us, GDP is not important, the happiness index is important. So obviously, the governance that you will evolve your vision will sort of work accordingly. For some societies, environment is more important than the industrial development, etc., or they try to make it the best combination of it. So that's this theory says that societies will evolve from as a simpler to complex, and they are not necessarily linear. Second is functionalist. I mean, this is more theoretical. One that societies always try to be harmonious. This is what it says. Um, it works like an organ. Individual parts cannot survive on their own, so they interact with each other, whether within the as individuals within families, the families interact within the communities, communities interact at the larger level, at the state level. So uh, the point is that societies tend to harmonize, and accordingly they adapt itself, accordingly the changes take place. There are several criticisms of this theory that societies in fact the very next theory says that no, societies do not necessarily work in harmony. There is always a conflict. Societies by nature because by nature they are unequal, and they are competitive. There are rich people, there are poor people, there are powerful people, there are less powerful people, and obviously broadly rich and powerful people, they try to exploit vulnerable groups. And there comes a time, and this is Karl Marx theory. I mean, most of you would know that it leads to conflict, provoking people to take actions. So social change in that sense occurs as a kind of consequence of this. Uh, just to sort of summarize till what we have said, that social change is in some ways a natural process, but it's also a conscious process. Social change take place because of several factors, but broadly, from the theoretical point of view, we have said evolutionist, functionalist, and conflictist. Now, what causes social changes? One is the natural. Obviously, I think most common is historically speaking, most common factor, or most, let's say, the dominant factor has been the natural. It could mean climate, for in the modern language, climate change, natural disasters, rivers taking different courses, forests being depleted, etc. So whatever, because our lives are very closely, sort of intertwined with the natural environments. They are even now, but more so in historically. So any changes in natural environment, if there is a flood, if there is a sukha, drought, uh, famine, it will change. It will change sometimes very substantially, sometime in a subtle manner. So deforestation take place, communities have to move. Those who are animal husbandry or the sort of animal sort of breeders, they have to move because changes are taking place, and this movement migration could lead, you know change in within their lives, but they sometimes they also lead to conflict. So what we are saying is that one of the most important factors is natural. Now, is this natural change now entirely natural, or is it also because of the human interventions? The current discourse on climate change obviously says that the deforestations, etc., they are not natural, or even the floods, etc., are not natural. They are caused because of the human activity at some place or the other. And we are, as a globe, as they say, it's a global village. We are so connected with each other that even natural changes, which apparently are natural, they are not natural in the strict sense of the word, and human interventions is required. The second change is obviously the conflict that we have just said, because societies are essentially unequal, even within the families or within the communities, within the village, within the nation, and these inequalities are based on class, race, gender, religion. So these, and very often they foster more dissatisfaction and anger. And with the new technology coming in, because uh, mm, for example, 50 years ago, dissatisfaction at a local level will take time to travel to other parts, but now with the new internet, etc., dissatisfaction at one level, whether it is based on one community, etc., it travels very fast. So the changes and the resistance to those changes are also taking place. The third factor is demographic changes. Demographic changes could be, it could be, it could be through, let's say,
Excuse
immigration.
me, sir.
Yes,
Excuse me. So your screen is not visible, sir. You are means you're already explaining it, or
screen is not visible.
no, sir? Your screen is not visible.
Just saying. Yes. Oh, you should have told me first.
I thought you were explaining, so I have kept my on that.
Is it visible now?
No, sir. Not
No, sir.
Okay, okay. Just hold on, please. Screen is not visible to them. Share. Yes. Can you see it now?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
We
sir.
can see that.
Yes, it is visible now.
Thank you, sir. Sorry for interrupting.
No, no problem. It's okay now?
now it's okay, sir.
It's okay. It's okay, sir.
Okay, good. So I just since the screen is now, so I'll take just a minute to repeat it, that what we have discussed is social change, then cause, what causes social change. So if we discuss about theories, then what we are saying right now is that factors or causes for social change are natural. They could be conflict because of the inequality in society, and then the demographic changes take place, social change follows, and then the in the current sort of let's say age, the biggest factor is technology. New inventions, discoveries, spread of new ideas, which also are connected to technology. And internet obviously is the biggest technological revolution, one in the last century. I mean, not only it has changed cultures of individual countries, but I guess the entire world. And even the remotest possible, I mean, if we see now, even as we say that, even the poorest ones, remotest areas, they have access to telephones, to technology, to communication methods. So it has completely changed how we communicate as well as the structure of the economies. For example, now in a popular this thing we say that that we have become closer to the world, but we have gone farther within the families. Within the families we get disconnected, but we are connected to the world. So this is the sea change that has taken place, and this change has implications at the local level, in social relations, at the community level, etc. Very often accompanied by these technological changes are also the economic processes. And we have new markets. For example, in when you have festival shoppings, let's say 10 years ago, markets would be full. I mean, they are still full, but then because of the this delivery and online shopping, etc., many changes have taken place. I mean, I'm not saying these are necessarily good or bad, but it's a huge change. It has given new meanings to how do you market, how do you sort of go for shopping, etc. uh, then obviously all the social changes at small level, at bigger level, they start with some idea. So it is essentially the ideas, whether it is also about the technology, because technology is also driven or by some ideas. So one was technological ideas, and then we have political and social ideas. It could be uh, it could mean anything. It could be sort of whichever area. We change the form of the governments, we change how the religious bodies constitute themselves, and accordingly sometimes it lead to political revolutions, sometimes even small concepts like corruption. So India against corruption, there was a social movement, the political process was formed, and then this has meaning, this has implications at the local level. So these are different factors, natural, as I said, demographic, technological, economic ideas, whether they are social and political, they are all big factors. Now we come to sort of what we think as as the sort of as a human intervention led social change, because these changes that we have just discussed, whether it is about technology or demography, some of these changes they are obviously not entirely autonomous, but there is something on which we do not have major control. I mean, if internet is taking place, howsoever we may say that it is good or bad, it is leading to bad sort of influence in the society, or among children are not, they don't go and play outside, they are confined to the phones, etc. But we have control. I mean, we tend to think that we have control, but we have little control over that. So then what do we do as people who are main stakeholders in the society, as teachers, as academicians, as social activists or social professionals? We have a responsibility, and we think that that's also part of our job, to give a direction to social change based on our vision. So whether it is at a larger movement, it can lead to a social movement, and because change is not necessarily an intellectual process. It's often connected to formation of new movement. As I was talking about, India against corruption, for example. It came from an idea, It came from an individual case, but then it turned into a new social movement. And now, in the earlier age, social movements were far more, let's say, profound, effective. But these days, because of the changed nature of governance, changed nature of technology, uh, the shape of the movements have taken place. Earlier, for example, for a social movement, you need two important ingredients. One important, or let's say three important ingredients. One is that issue itself, that there is an issue and you want to deal with that. B, then you need an idea to change the situation. And C, and most important one as far as social movements are concerned, that you need a leader, a charismatic leader who can sort of lead the movement. Because whether it was about freedom struggle, or even before that, social reforms, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Swami Dayan Saraswati, or in the West, social movements have always been led by charismatic leaders. Now, do we have charismatic leaders in the social sphere these days, or they are all short-lived? I think because of, again, the technological changes that have taken place, now everyone tries to be a leader. And we now, in the internet or so online, we term them as influencers, but they tend to think that they are leaders. Now the leadership now the following is not on the ground. Now the following is in how many likes you get, how many sort of followers you have on the internet, or on Twitter, or on Facebook, or etc. So one was the social movement arena. Now the other the method or approach to social change, or to make an intervention for social change, is what we call social advocacy. Now, what is social advocacy? Social advocacy is two, three important things. That A, it's a conscious process. It's, as I said, as you said in the beginning, change is an autonomous process. It will take place, but what we are doing is to giving that change a shape, whether in terms of the form, or in terms of the speed, or in terms of the intended outcome. So the social advocacy is a conscious process. It's a systematic process. Uh, I mean, for example, again coming back to the the leaders at the village level. For example, at the community, in the community engagement, there could be in the spur of moment an issue. Some people get together, they react to a situation. Um, this reaction could lead to some change. It may not lead to change. Even if it leads to some change, is that change lasting? Is that change sustainable? So so that's one way of spontaneity in your reactions to a situation. But there is also a systematic process of inducing social change. This does not mean that the spontaneity has no value. Sometimes even the systematic process will start some level of spontaneous reaction, but ultimately it has to adopt a process. It has to go through a trajectory in order to to not only achieve the intended goal, but also to create in the process some level of structure, some level of rules, regulations, etc., which would help changes. So a conscious effort, a systematic process of inducing, resisting change. This point, it is a systematic process, but it is also an instrument to resist sometimes change. Sometimes you induce change, sometimes you also resist change. I mean, for example, if there is some, we see in social movements, a big dam is being built. So there will be a displacement. So communities come together, they resist that change. A new law has taken place. Is farmers, laws, for example. They were the idea was that they will have very far-reaching impact on agriculture, and obviously the changes in the lives of farming communities and their associated sort of stakeholders. but the community thought that it was not correct, so they resisted changes. So that's also an advice. It's not always necessary to bring changes, it also means resist changes. And very often it's an act of supporting a particular cause that is aimed at, for us, that is aimed at improving the lasting well-being of a specific group of individuals. So the focus is also, please underline the it's improving the lasting well-being of specific group of individuals, communities, or targeting a social population. So in that sense, social advocacy is a very broad process. It's a conscious effort, it's a systematic process, and it's an act of supporting a cause to improve the lives in a more sort of lasting manner. And it could help, I mean, it could target a group of individuals, for example, women who have faced violence. So, I mean, gender-based violence, for example, the atrocities against scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, for example, is could be another one. Yeah, I mean, any sort of marginalized group you could think of is a potential sort of target of social advocacy, or it is targeting a specific social problem itself. I mean, we have long seen that from the days of sati pratha, sati practice, now to the child labor, etc. So sometimes it's also targeted not specific community but the social problem itself. An important thing also to understand is that sometimes it can start from an individual but lead to a large scale changes. We have in the recent history, we have the biggest example of Nirbhaya. It's not that rapes had not taken place before, but I think the way uh, uh, different forces, different actors came together to react to this, it led to changes, larger scale changes, because from it was not about giving let's say punishment to the perpetrators of the crime of that particular individual. So definitely the giving relief, rehabilitation, or justice to an individual was important, but ultimately what we thought that this is not an isolated incident. Such incidents are taking place um, different across the country. So policy changes were introduced, and it led to a larger scale change in the laws, etc. There were similarly the cases of minimum wage, for example. It again started with a group or one individual not getting a minimum wage, but then you realized that this is not an isolated or individual case. A minimum age act was passed, and it was sort of then it, it provided sort of support or justice to a large group of people. So what I'm saying is that social advocacy leads to social change, and when we say social change, it means obviously more than one individual. But what I'm also saying is that social change could start from an individual, but it could large, or eventually it could lead to a large scale change. Now, an important thing also to note is that each of these processes they interact with each other. I mean, it's not possible that one single factor will be responsible for social change. For example, technological change will essentially interact with, or it's always in tandem with economic processes. You create a new market. Demographic changes, for example, it sometimes or very often comes with conflict. So these changes, they are not one change is not the sole, one factor is not the sole determinant of social change, but they sometimes a group of factors interact, and they it induces social change. So that's one part of what is our vision. I mean, what do we want to achieve, and which is social change. Social change is transformation from stage A to stage B. And what kind of transformation? Culture, social structures, etc., justice, etc., that we have seen. Now, the second concept we are dealing with And one of the ways, and there are different ways of achieving social change, movements, etc. And one of the ways that we are discussing today is social advocacy. What is social advocacy? So obviously that's the first thing that we have just discussed. What is social advocacy is? It's a systematic process to bring change, resist change. The idea is to support a group of individuals, target communities, etc. So let's say, if as a social scientist or as a social activist, what you are aiming at. It's not just to say that no, we want to change, and there is something is too bad, or सब जगह corruption ही है, चारों सब भ्रष्ट नेता हैं. That could be possibly true, but when you go for social advocacy, it's important to know what do you want to achieve. Okay, corruption तो है, but what do you want? What do you want to change? सिर्फ करप्शन कहने से तो मतलब प्रॉब्लम स्टेटमेंट तो है ही, लेकिन इसका सोल्यूशन कैसे निकलेगा? सोल्यूशन तो तभी निकलेगा जब आप स्पेसिफिक गोल तय करेंगे. हो सकता है कि it's not possible that you deal with all the elements of that problem. For example, gender based violence or violence against women. Okay, it's a problem. Then what do you do? If you ask 10 people, they will have 10 different ideas. नहीं, महिलाओं को जो है ना, हमको सुरक्षा देनी चाहिए. दिल्ली में कहा उन्होंने, बसों में मार्शल होने चाहिए. FIR कराने जाए तो उसकी FIR लिखी जानी चाहिए. सेल्फ डिफेंस ट्रेनिंग देनी चाहिए, फॉर एग्जाम्पल. कुछ लोग और बहुत फंडामेंटल सवालों पे सोचेंगे तो नहीं, ये तो सोशलाइजेशन का प्रोसेस ही खराब है. वी डील आवर सन्स एंड डॉटर्स डिफरेंटली, कल्चरल प्रॉब्लम है. सो ये सब एंड एवरीथिंग इज ट्रू. बच्चों ज्यादा हमको ध्यान उनके एजुकेशन पर देना चाहिए या उनके स्वास्थ्य पर देना चाहिए. नाउ as I said, as a problem statement, it is correct, but you cannot deal with everything together. So you have to map based on your. Now, how do you decide which goal do you want to work on? I think it's important to understand which had the most multiplier effect. कि आप एक चीज से करने से उसके 10 तरह के इम्पैक्ट होंगे. लोग एजुकेशन के बारे में फॉर एग्जांपल कहते हैं. So that's one way of determining that if you have 10 elements to deal with to solve one problem, how do you choose your goal? What do you want? What change do you want to bring? Second is, it could also depend on your own strength, that your own capabilities. That okay, I'm not a charismatic leader. I'm not Anna Hazare, or I'm not X or Y. What can I do as an individual, or as a group of individuals, or as a small organization? Then I keep my goals accordingly, because as we say that you cannot deal with everything at one point of time. So setting your goal is very important, to be realistic, depending on the complexity of the issue, and also depending on your strength, which also means your resources availability, etc. The second thing would be to understand, to map clearly what is your audience. Audience means what's your target group. Do you want to work with MLAs? Do you want with the MPs? Do you want to work with ministers to get things changed? So otherwise तो क्या होता है ना, हम लोग as if you have not done this analysis, sometimes we don't even know to whom should we go and submit our application. यदि आपकी हेल्थ की प्रॉब्लम है तो ऑब्वियसली आप उस आदमी के पास जाएंगे विद इन द हेल्थ सिस्टम जो एग्जैक्टली इस प्रॉब्लम को एड्रेस कर रहा होगा. So knowing your audience, your target is very important because only that person can bring the change. Next element is important to understand your political and social landscape. What is the governance structure? ये काम पंचायत के लेवल पे ही हो जाएगा या do we need to go at the state level or do we need to go at the central level? If a police station is not filing my FIR, women has gone, if FIR is not filed, what should she do? Should she go to the next higher officer? वहां भी नहीं होता है, then what would she do? So it's important to understand the structures and decision making processes. So basically to understand what is going around you. So that is why social advocacy seems in a way बहुत लोग कहते हैं कि हम सोशल एडवोकेसी करते हैं, but it's not that easy. It's a very conscious but also systematic process which is dependent on a thorough analysis of everything. So important to understand goal, who is your target audience, who will make that change happen, and what is the sort of context. The fourth one element would be what are the activities that you will undertake to make those changes. What are the inputs that would be needed, and within that, what do you have already you have in terms of human capital, in terms of social capital, and what you need to mobilize. क्योंकि ये कुछ चीजें आपके कैंपेन से, आपके अभियान से, आपका जो भी काम करें, it's important. These are common sense things. There is nothing what they call rocket science in this. But what I'm trying to do is it's important to understand and map these things. क्योंकि एक बार आपने start कर दिया process, then sometimes the processes are not entirely in your control. एक बार आपने community के साथ discussion चालू कर दिया और वहां पे कोई भी action शुरू कर दिया, you cannot take it back just like that because you do not have resources for today. You should have thought of those issues or those possibilities of those challenges beforehand. So understanding of inputs, what resources do you have, human, social or economic, that's important. Then another element would be because very often you are not on one individual. It's a group of you. As a leader, you could start as one individual, but it's a group of people that are involved in this process. So what is our success? What will be our success? How do you define that? So it's important to set some benchmarks because otherwise आप कहेंगे कि हम सफल हो गए, आपका साथी कहेगा कि नहीं अभी तो हम सफल नहीं हुए, you are just it up, और तीसरा आदमी कम्युनिटी पे कुछ और कहेगा. So it's important to understand that in order to achieve that goal, what are your milestones, what are your benchmarks, based on which you will decide that if you are right, if you are on the right track or not. Because otherwise होता क्या है कि हम लोग start तो करते हैं लेकिन then but we have different notions of what should be done. वो तो चलो आपने set कर लिया, but even in terms of progress, whether you have been able to do it or not, it can vary, and it can vary very substantially. So it's important again to form a collective understanding before you sort of start that what would be our benchmark or what would be the indicators of our success, as in the common language they say. The last element for this in this mapping is that you have to see that whatever changes you bring or you help bring those changes through these different strategies, are those changes sort of lasting? Are those changes sustainable? So how do you defend that? So you also need to put in place some factors, some structures that will be able to defend itself when the time comes or when the challenges comes. So otherwise, what happens is the changes has taken place For example, I also work with the, in the public health, which is tobacco control. You have brought in laws, changes have taken place. There is a reduction in smoking. But since the tobacco industry, keeps pushing their product, you are a little slack, or become a little complacent. It comes back. So the rate of smoking, again increases. So whatever changes you bring, you need to also understand that there will be challenges to that change, because through the change you are also changing the status. Change essentially means status quo, that existing structures, and there will be some actors and both factors which will try to come back those to that status quo. So you have to ensure that you put in place some structures, as I said, or some factors which will defend that change. So this is about social advocacy. I hope it some sense. So social advocacy is not just kind of uh, let's say very often used as a tool or as part of some process. Social advocacy by itself is quite a systematic process, which involves understanding, mapping, analysis of these. Now, the last slide of this is that, and which is the core of this discussion is, um, I think someone will have to mute their mics. There's a lot of noise. If someone can please mute it, can you check it? पर देख लें आप किसी के माइक से बार-बार आवाज आ रही है.
Naseem sir, Naseem sir, it's your mic. Can you mute your mic, please?
Okay, so as I said, the last slide is, we have understood social change. We have understood sort of social advocacy. Now, how these interplay with each other, that is the, as I said, the core of this discussion is. So what does social advocacy do for social change? These are some of the things that they do. One is social norm change, that since we are talking about, if you remember, lasting changes, that the change should be sustainable, change should be lasting, because there will be many changes. So if the social norm itself gets changed, then the society adapts to it, those changes very quickly. So what social advocacy does is the social change, whether it is the change, for example, I'm taking the behavioral aspect. How do you sort of treat your, or what is the relationship between men and women in a household? How they behave how the husband behaves with wife is going together in some traditional society, even if in a village house, like husband and wife go together, that's also a challenge, because people look at it sort of differently. In public health, as I said, smoking, for example, in public place, are people sort of changing their behavior? So the first change is about social norm. It could mean change in behavior. It could mean the social norm itself. Individual behavior, but individual behavior is not sufficient for social change. It can be a triggering factor for social change, but it has to multiply itself into a social norm change. So that is one change, one part of social change that takes place with social advocacy. The second sort of area of change is change in the power relations. And this power, because we discussed about conflict theories, etc. There is always some level of power play between different groups, whether it is husband and wife, whether it is just men and women, whether it is like gender based and in your office space. So there is kind of as I said, power structure involved, which is based on gender. It could also be power which is based on class, rich and poor, urban and rural, tribal and urban people. So what is the relationship? Obviously, one is in a dominant in caste. There are some dominant caste. There are some marginalized castes, socially excluded castes. So that is, I mean, even if you put in place, for example, some program which helps those individuals, and you do not change the power relations, uh, then the change is very insignificant, or it is not lasting. Even if the change takes place, you take out or take back that program or policy, or less implementation, and the problem sort of goes back to the sort of same level. Marginalization, uh, uh, whether it is about child labor, for example, or rag pickers at the street level, those who are completely in many ways marginalized. And again, the marginalization is could be based on, again, caste, class, etc. So unless the social norm changes, unless you are also able to change the power relations, sometimes even the interventions are not helpful. I just give you an example. I'll sort of explain it based on gender. Now, women and men both have roles in the family and in the society. Uh, how do you change, or how do you help women in their, in improving their conditions? One example in rural areas is that the responsibility of bringing drinking water or arranging drinking water is mostly with the women. I mean, they in Rajasthan, they have to walk, tens of kilometers to get that water, etc. So to help them, what you have done is that, okay, install a hand pump in the village, so that women do not have to go that far. Now that's one level of change, because it gives some additional sort of space to women, some comfort to women. They don't have to walk. But if the power relations do not change, even if she gets more time, more space, will she be able to spend it on herself? Is this time available to her? Or has it changed anything substantial in the family? अभी हमने बहुत सारी बात बहुत दिनों से सिलेंडर देने की और वो सब हो रही है. Okay, probably at one level it has made some changes, but if that responsibility is still continues, and if the family's economic or finances gets changed, again the drudgery comes back to women. So what we are saying is that unless there are some changes which are relation to power factor with each other, similarly with the caste, do you also see that voice? Hear that voice?
Amol sir, please mute yourself. Amol sir, please mute yourself.
सर जिससे उससे आवाज आ रही है, प्लीज म्यूट योरसेल्फ.
Amol sir, please.
Amol sir,
Okay, let's continue. I think it seems unlikely that it will change. So one was social norm change, the second was change in power, gender relations. As I said, if you want to make those changes sustainable, lasting, little permanent, then it would be important to understand that power relations have changed that. The third outcome of social advocacy's interface with social change is change in public policy and laws. Again, the most in the recent memory, the most important one is Nirbhaya case. Since that happened, and there was a uproar, there were movement, there was sort of, people were out on the streets. So it had gone more than social advocacy. It was a public outcry. But then following that outcry, there is a systematic process that had happened. So ultimately, it led to the change in IPC. There's special, laws or public policy. Nirbhaya centers were made, the budgets were assigned, etc. So that is the second part, the third element of this, that through social advocacy, you change social, you change, also change public policy. And the last one is institutional change. That even if you have changed, let's say, law or public policy, but the institutions of governance are not in your favor, or there are no institutions to do that. If you remember the change in public policy, for example, again coming back to Nirbhaya, the one-stop centers have been made in many sort of states. I don't know about the states that you come from, which addresses the issue of gender violence against women or gender-based violence at one institution. Sorry, broadly, it could also mean the institution which are social institutions like marriage, so religion, etc. So that's also a change that happens with social advocacy. So just to summarize, that when you go for social advocacy and the intention is social change, what does it change, or what is that change sort of reflect in? It reflects in social norm change. It reflects in change in power relations. It reflects in public policy changes, and because unless the laws also change, education, for example, if there is a problem in access to education, you could have started one school, 5 schools, 10 schools, but the problem was so large. That is why the groups that were working at that point of time, they pressurized the government and brought in the right to education law, because then it would address the problem of lack of education in a larger way. And the fourth one is, as I said, to support those changes, you need changes in the institutions. These institutions, it could mean social institutions or institutions of politics or institutions of governance. So broadly, that's it, and what I thought would be a good point for this, also for the discussions. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
On the
Thank
part
you,
of
sir.
the participants,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
okay. So, is there any question from the on the part of the participants? Anyone want to clear the doubts? Dr. Narendra Kumar is present there. Okay, sir. So really, we extend the gratitudes and thanks to you for sharing. Really, it's a very valuable things to share with our participants. And I do hope that in the practice also, it will be strengthening the strength of the participants. So really, we are very much thankful to you, sir. Dr.
Absolutely,
Narendra.
it's a pleasure.
So now we are taking leave. Then next session will be at 10:45. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very
thank you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Naseem sir. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.